Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is September 28th. On this day in 1982, a little girl in Chicago had a head cold and was given extra-strength Tylenol by her parents. By the next morning, she was dead. By the end of the week, there were 6 more fatalities. The city and then the nation panicked, and over-the-counter medicine never looked the same again. Today, we're discussing the Chicago Tylenol Murders. Let's get started. They were 7 ordinary Chicago area lives, connected only by the type of routine you don't even think about: a pill for a headache or a small ache after a long day. But by the end of the week, their names would be read at news conferences across the country. It all began before dawn in Elk Grove Village. On September 28th, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman woke up with a head cold. Her parents handed her an extra-strength Tylenol, and minutes later, she collapsed in the bathroom. Paramedics rushed in, baffled. There was no obvious reason a healthy child should just stop. And by the next day, Mary was gone. That same day, 27-year-old Adam Janis, a postal worker in Arlington Heights, left work with chest pain, picked up some Tylenol, and lay down to rest. He was dead within hours. His family all gathered in shock. Adam's younger brother, Stanley, who was 25, and Stanley's new wife, Teresa, who was only 19, were grief-stricken, and they had headaches. They each took capsules from Adam's bottle. They both collapsed, and in a single afternoon, 3 members of one extended family were gone. Across the suburbs, 31-year-old Mary McFarland tried to push through her shift at the Illinois Bell Customer Center in Lombard. But when a headache bloomed, she stepped into the break room, swallowed Tylenol, and never made it back to her desk. In Winfield, Mary Lynn Reiner, 27, was just a week postpartum with her 4th child. She reached for Tylenol at home, and then she hit the floor. And in the city, 35-year-old Paula Prince, a United Airlines flight attendant in Old Town, ended her day like a lot of us do, with a quick errand on the way home. A Walgreens security camera captured a now famous still: Paula at the register on North Wells, Tylenol in hand. When friends couldn't reach her, police found Paula in her apartment. The bottle was open on the vanity, and just 1 capsule was missing. Those 7 names: Mary Kellerman, Adam Janis, Stanley and Teresa Janis, Mary McFarland, Mary Lynn Reiner, and Paula Prince, trace a map from the western suburbs to the near north side and explain why this story pierced the country's sense of safety. This wasn't a high-risk behavior or a dangerous place. It was a bathroom counter, and it was a brand that everyone knew. After Adam Janis and his family members, Teresa and Stanley, all died after taking Tylenol, the coincidence became too strange to ignore. Public health nurse Helen Jensen drove to the Janis home, found the Tylenol, counted the missing capsules, and returned to the ER holding the bottle like evidence. "This is the cause," she said. Noticing an almond smell, medical examiner investigator Nick Pichos and Dr. Edmund Donahue moved to test for cyanide. By that Thursday, lab work confirmed the nightmare. There was cyanide in the victim's blood. Chicago officials moved quickly. Mayor Jane Byrne and the city health authorities told residents to stop taking Tylenol and yanked it from city shelves even before there was a nationwide recall. What began as scattered tragedies became a public health emergency with a common denominator. Toxicology eventually found not just a trace of cyanide, but massive doses in some capsules in amounts that were far beyond lethal. One investigator would later put it bluntly, quote, "Once you took the pill, you were going to die," end quote. The first clue to emerge was the lot numbers. The Janis bottle matched the lot of Mary Kellerman's, creating a link across 2 suburbs. Johnson & Johnson, Tylenol's parent company, moved to recall that lot. But the relief was short-lived. Other victims' bottles came from different lots. If the poison wasn't tied to one production line, then the problem wasn't at the factory. Search teams and FDA agents fanned out. Tainted bottles turned up at a Jewel. 2 bottles were found still on the shelf at an Osco at Woodfield Mall. One was found at a Walgreens in Old Town. There was one at Frank's Finer Foods in Winfield, and many more. They were different chains in different neighborhoods. The randomness was the point. Johnson & Johnson recognized immediately that this was bigger than a single product. The company warned hospitals and distributors, pulled advertising, halted production, and went on television to tell people not to take their own medicine. But tainted bottles kept showing up. Then, on October 5th, 1982, J&J did the unthinkable. They issued a nationwide recall of 31 million bottles of Tylenol, one of the largest in U.S. history, eating an estimated $100 million in 1982 dollars. 2 months later, Tylenol returned to shelves with packaging that taught America a new term: tamper-resistant. The triple seal, which was a glued box, a plastic neckband, and a foil seal, under the red logo. Federal rules followed in a rush. The FDA issued tamper-resistant packaging requirements for over-the-counter drugs, and in 1983, Congress passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act, making consumer product tampering a federal crime. Tylenol's market share plummeted in the panic, down to single digits, but by the next year, it was climbing again. You still see the case in business schools. A brand nearly destroyed by murder regains trust through transparency and redesign. It shouldn't take tragedy to get there, but it often does. Now, the immediate threat had been stopped, but no one knew who was behind the attacks. Within days, a letter landed at Johnson & Johnson. The writer claimed responsibility and demanded $1 million to stop. It was brazen, specific, and it was signed by a man named James W. Lewis. Lewis was arrested and convicted, not for murder, but for extortion, and he was sentenced to 10 years. They couldn't prove that he had tampered with the bottles, but he remained a shadow suspect for decades. He was interviewed, searched, and in 2010, he was compelled to give DNA and fingerprints. He insists that he wrote the letter to target someone he believed had wronged his family, not because he poisoned anyone. Investigators never found a clean bridge tying him to the bottles. And when he died in 2023 at the age of 76, the case lost its most visible person of interest. But there are other names and other rabbit holes. In 1982 and 83, police scrutinized Roger Arnold, a suburban dock worker who talked about cyanide and brushes near relevant locations. He was eventually ruled out in the Tylenol murders, but months later, in a paranoid spiral, he shot and killed a man he wrongly thought tipped police off about him. He served 15 years in prison and died in 2008. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, with better forensic tools, the task force rechecked what it could: swabs, prints, and degraded packaging. They even asked the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, for a DNA sample because of his ties to Chicago. But nothing came of that. The most durable theory never changed. This was retail tampering. The killer moved through stores in different suburbs, quietly seeded a small number of bottles, and walked away. That model fits with the mixed lot numbers, the multiple chains, the 2 factories, and it explains why the case is so hard to crack. There's no single camera angle, no shared victim, and no neat forensic chain from shelf to suspect. A small, familiar bottle, a ritual we barely noticed. Take 2 capsules with water. In the last days of September 1982, an unknown person turned that ritual into a weapon. The result changed packaging, changed law, and changed how we look at anything sealed. The Chicago Tylenol murders began in a bathroom just like yours, with a brand you know, and they're still unsolved. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found this episode compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!